All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Shad Johnson, and you're on Kitchen and Bath Experts, and we've got Yvonne. And Yvonne, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Landivar.
Landivar with us
That's correct.
today. And
Yep.
Yvonne, why don't you take a minute and just introduce yourself so everybody kind of knows a little bit about you.
Sure. My name's Yvonne Landivar. I'm a kitchen and bath designer. I'm AKBD certified, and I've been a designer for, oh gosh, almost 25 years. So it's been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
25 years, really.
Yeah.
That is a long
And
time.
yeah, I know it flies, right? And I have a little showroom. This is the back area of my desk in my showroom.
Well, welcome. What we're going to be talking about today, Yvonne and I have been talking about by messaging for the last month or two, is in regards to a couple of areas that we think are kind of important in today's market, so to say, and needs. And those relate to, we're going to first talk about multi-generational needs. And we're going to focus primarily in the kitchen and maybe bathrooms if we have a little bit of time. But let's kind of jump into that. Yvonne, I've designed thousands of projects, but when you brought this to my attention, I've been thinking a lot about this. And though I've designed projects where maybe you have a mother-in-law, or maybe adult children living in the home with the primary homeowners, I've not done a lot of multi-generational. So I'm kind of excited to see where this conversation takes us. You said that you've had a little bit of experience with that, and I thought maybe we could just collaborate together and talk about what things, so what do you see as maybe some of the primary things you think that people need to consider when they're, say, planning a kitchen when there's a lot of generations?
Well, from firsthand experience where I lived in a multi-generational household, I mean, I still do. I have my kids who are, kind of late teenagers at this point, and my mom who's in her early 70s. So,
Okay.
there's 3 generations right now in my household. So I can relate to that. And when my grandma was alive, we had 4 generations in my household. So I can tell you
Wow.
firsthand, one of the biggest issues is making items accessible to the other generations. My grandmother was getting shorter and shorter as time went on. So she kind of lost, I think, a total of 3 or 4 inches of height during the time I lived with her, which was most of my life. So
Wow.
I think that's one of the biggest things. And, as people age as well, they start getting, mobility issues. They can't walk too fast. They need things that are more reachable. They can't really dig under the cabinet. So, using stuff like roll out trays or pull out, pantry units or spice units, it makes a lot of sense, because then they'll be able to reach it and, get to it. Otherwise, things end up being kind of lost in the back. So I think it just makes sense to utilize these principles with really any kitchen that we design, because obviously, as we get older, things get a little harder to get to, right? So I
Yeah.
think it just makes more sense. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is also, of course, making room for everyone, which is, in a tight quarters, it's like everyone is on top of each other. So making even a little nook where you can say, okay, you can go and do your homework here, and grandma can prep the meal over there, makes sense. Even if it's a small space, I think that's achievable. So, that's kind of like my firsthand experience, because I lived through it, that I think would make a lot of sense. So I do take these ideas into account whenever I am designing for a household where I see that there's, not just, a couple, or if they have, older children, or if they have even, as you said, in-laws in the home, which is now very common. So, I have to say it's becoming more and more popular, I guess, because actually cost of living has increased. And so, people need to, I guess, work together to be able to afford everything. And so they end up living in the same household. That's kind of what's happening. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's
yeah.
interesting. So you talked a little about cabinets. Let's talk a little about appliances. Do you find if people are on top of each other, does this affect the type of appliances that you might recommend or you think would make sense in multi-generational spaces?
So I think what makes sense as you get older, for example, I know that some of my older clients have usually wanted to split the range, how we, 30, 30, 36, 40, 48 is the typical width, but then, the door bends down all the way to the floor. And with back problems, you just can't get to it, or it's just too low for you, right? So I've noticed that most of my clients who are, older than, let's say 60, they usually want to split the oven, the range, and put a cooktop and an oven. That makes a lot of sense. I've noticed also the use of like ulterior refrigeration areas, like instead of just having, part of the refrigerator, like maybe a beverage center or some sort of a freezer somewhere else. That's very popular. I mean, I've worked with clients who then tell me, oh yeah, besides the ones that we have here, we have them in the garage, or we have them in the back area. So, there's additional storage for food and frozen goods. And so that makes a lot of sense. I haven't really seen a lot of need for like odd gadgets. I know I did a kitchen years ago where my client wanted one of those beer dispensers, for their bar area. I mean, that's quite unusual. And it was, something that was very unique to them because they had a bar included into their kitchen space. But other than that, I haven't seen odd or unusual appliances. I mean, the dishwasher is great. I noticed that it has gotten smaller. I don't know if you've had this experience, but, most people don't know that there's an 18-inch size dishwasher.
Uh-huh.
And so some of the older generations, like my mom and my grandmother, would like to only wash by hand. So then it was like, well, the dishwasher is just going to sit there. And do you really want to sacrifice additional 6 inches to it and put a 24-inch dishwasher? So in my own kitchen, we ended up doing an 18-inch dishwasher. And I tell you, it only works. It doesn't get used. We all wash by hand. So it's really interesting that, most folks require or want a dishwasher, and they'll probably use it all the time. But we use it for storage, really. We don't really use it at all. In case of resale or in case of renting it in the future, it's like, okay, there is a dishwasher, but it's only 18 inches wide. Yeah.
Well, you bring up some interesting points. It's funny, in the past, I'll usually tell people you want to design for you, but let's say you're planning for future resale value and you do your own dishes. I tell people sometimes a dishwasher can sometimes be about the same cost as a cabinet. So why not do a dishwasher there, use it as a cabinet, and then when you want to wash dishes, and you can wash dishes as well. But either way, it functions as both, right? It's a fancy cabinet.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Do you find ever that because I've designed a lot of kitchens for multiple users, not necessarily generational users, but for multiple users in the primary users in a house, and we'll design, say, 2 dishwashers or 2 cleanup areas or 2 cooking areas. Do you find that's helpful with multi-generations as well?
You know what? I haven't had any experience like that. I have done kosher kitchens where we do need to separate the meat and the dairy. And so there's been, 2 sinks and 2 dishwashers and 2 sets of areas where you put dishes. And that's because they cannot share the same space. So it's for, and I've asked them, well, why is it split? And besides being religious, reasons, it's because they don't want to mix those 2 substances, like dairy and meat should never like touch each other. So, I respect that. And we've been able to do, I've been able to design kitchens that have been kosher. But other than that, I haven't seen a need for like having multiple appliances in my experience, because obviously I have not done kitchens where it's been other users besides the family. It's been usually like, the in-laws and the owners of the home, and then maybe their children, and then maybe even grandchildren. What I have noticed is that they do want to, for example, if there's a home that has small children, it's like, well, we don't want to have like the liquor bottles accessible to the kids. So then we design it, in an upper area instead of a lower, like, let's say, lattice cabinet or a wine rack. We don't want it on the floor because we don't want the kids to, touch it or play with it or anything. So I have noticed that, and we do have to take these things into account, to also for safety reasons, right? I have also incorporated like lower counter areas for like kneading dough or, baking goods and that kind of thing. And so, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but generationally, it seems like the newer generations keep getting taller, right? I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
Like in my own family, my kids are at least, a good 6 inches or so taller than I am. Not that I'm that tall anyways, but but my grandmother and my mom are usually, are exactly actually smaller than I am. So it's like, okay, if you're designing for older people, you got to design with something more accessible, more lower. Even the standard heights, for example, the 36-inch standard counter height that we normally use as NKBA guidelines has been a little too tall for my mom, for example. And she's like 4'11", so she's pretty short. And so it's like, yeah, you have to just keep in mind who's going to be making the meals, who's going to be prepping, and where you putting these items in order to make it accessible. So it's interesting to be able to do that, especially in a small kitchen. It's quite challenging. I mean, I've always found smaller spaces fascinating to design because they kind of take your thinking out of the box,
Yeah,
So
I agree with that. That's a good point. Well, good thoughts so far. Maybe one of the last points I think would be beneficial hopefully for those who are watching. It's been on my mind a little bit about the timing of use of the kitchen. So what I mean by this is I've worked on projects like, say, for student housing where they're sharing a kitchen, or for a clubhouse where multiple residential spaces are having access to, say, a cooking area where they can cook and entertain for larger groups. Have you found that in other words, the multi-generationally, it's basically different family units happen to use the same kitchen. Are they using it at different shifts, or they still try to use it at the same times of the day?
I think that's a pretty interesting question. When I've designed homes that have different folks using the same kitchen, they usually don't commingle at the same time. However, there might be times when they do. For example, for festivities or holidays, and I've been told, oh yeah, we have a huge amount of people here and everybody wants to pitch in the cooking. So can we make a space where people can gather to, prep and maybe discuss something or talk? So I like to incorporate seating areas with standing areas, which is something that maybe not a lot of designers do, but in a kitchen where you're able to, pull up a couple of chairs and while you're still cutting, the veggies or prepping something or, making the dough, kneading the dough, I think is quite important. And so I've done that. I've also liked to incorporate, for example, things that we can move around, which is something that I've started recently, like a moving island. Or I don't know if you've seen these gadgets where you can actually, it's a small space and you're like, well, I want to have a seating in my little tiny kitchen. And you're like, well, how do we accomplish that? So you can incorporate these kind of pull-out accessories. I don't know if you've seen them. You flip the drawer front out, and then you pull forward this sort of a cantilever counter where you can pull up a couple of stools, and there you have it. That's your eating area.
Nice.
So I think, and it's also kind of thinking into terms of like small, design, compact design, or like tiny living. I think a lot of the things that I've done lately have had to do with that. And I think it's because as a society, I think maybe we're kind of gearing more towards living more simply and kind of like in smaller, spaces that will be quite functional. So it's great because I've been able to kind of incorporate a lot of really cool ideas. In my own space here in my showroom, I actually added one of those rolling islands because I want to teach a class here in my space. And I'm like, well, how do I make the space, double up as also a classroom space? Not that I need a whole lot of space, maybe about, 8 or 10 people, but I'm like, okay, my space is confined. I'm going to have to push the island aside. And so my island is not fixed, but it does have seating. So that's pretty cool. And I've been able to incorporate these kinds of ideas into some of the projects I've done, which I find really pretty cool to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, some great ideas. For those who are watching, if you like what you're seeing and if you like the content, please subscribe, give us some comments, ask questions of Yvonne or myself. Maybe Yvonne, you can monitor the video and see if you have things to contribute to people who ask questions, or I can forward them on to you. So I guess, to wrap things up, guys, we're going to do more videos that relate to things like this. But if you're planning a kitchen around, your parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, I suppose, then hopefully some of these tips are helpful. If you have other questions, then put them in the comments and see if we can help you out. I'm a certified kitchen designer. Yvonne's an associate certified kitchen and bath designer. Is yours an AKB or AKD?
That's correct. I'm an AKBD certified, which is associate kitchen bath designer. Just means I have taken the test for both, but not the CKD or the CBD individually. So yeah, I know I kind of have to go around it and finally get it done, but it's been a long time and I'm always busy. So
at this point, you have the
time
experience and the knowledge to be a master certification, designer. Just having gone through the formalities of doing so, at least in my opinion. Sounds like you definitely know your stuff. I hope people will reach out, look out for you for advice and ideas as well. Where can they find your information?
So I am on the website. I mean, my website name is just landivardesign.com. You can Google my name and you will actually come across my page and my profile on house.com. It's just Yvonne Landivar. I'm also a contractor, so I actually manage entire projects, the whole thing. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
If you'll send me the links, I'll put them into the video to send people to those so they don't have to go searching either. Just make it a little bit easier. So thanks for watching.